Did you know the Iranian people are some of the greatest supporters of Israel in the entire world? On April 14th, the morning after the attack from Iran, if you looked on X, formerly known as Twitter, they had posts everywhere expressing their support for the nation of Israel. They even had posts showing spray-painted, graffitied walls saying things like, "Hit 'em, Israel, Iranians are behind you." I know this completely defies the narrative, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. I am Callie Mitchell, and welcome to my channel. I will not keep silent. But first, I just wanted to give a little bit of an update on some things that are going on with the channel. I was finally able to buy a mic set, so thank you so much to everyone who donated to that cause. I really appreciate it so much, and I just felt so blessed that contributions came in and that many of you were willing to sow financially into the ministry that I have here on YouTube for God's glory and for Israel. They should be arriving with my mother-in-law in the next few weeks, so we'll have better sound quality very soon. But I was just really amazed because you all gave to the dollar what I needed. So it kind of blew my mind just how exact it was and how the Lord really knew precisely what I needed. So praise the Lord for that, and we will have better sound quality soon, which means we're going to go on some much more fun adventures too. And also, I have some friends from here in Israel who've been doing a speaking tour around the world, and they sent me this photo from New Zealand. It was an image of a prayer wall that had my name and my channel posted on the board to be prayed over. So they didn't know who it was that put it up on the wall. Whoever it was, thank you so much for your support. I'd love to know, actually. So maybe tell me in the comments if it was you, or send me a message privately on Facebook. But let me know, because I just felt so encouraged and blessed by that. So that was really amazing. Okay, so back to today's topic, the Iranian people. Yeah, isn't this amazing? I am so encouraged by what is going on with the Iranian people and what it is that the Lord is doing through them. They have an anointing of Esther on them right now. And of course, Esther, the story of Esther took place in modern day Iran. The modern day Iranians are the ancient Persian people, and many of them actually still prefer to identify as Persians. But that is where Esther took place, and they have truly been called for such a time as this. Now, I wrote about this for All Israel News, and I would be really encouraged if you all would stop by and read the article and share the article, and even scroll down to the bottom and hit superb or like or something down at the bottom, and even leave a comment there. But let's share this information so that we can get the story of the Iranian people out for both their benefit and for that of the people of Israel. This is a joint story that we have together, and we really owe them so much support as they're showing support for us. So please do share that article. Some people prefer articles to videos, so please do share that article on your social media platforms. So what exactly is going on with the Iranian people? Well, it turns out that they are being oppressed by the same people, the same spirit that has been oppressing the nation of Israel. And they have been under this authority for the last 45 years. Now, I am not using the word oppressed in the Marxist sense. I am using it in the spiritual sense, in the way that we can come under a spiritual oppression. What I'm talking about here is the Ephesians 6 form of oppression. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers of this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. And the stronghold that they've been oppressed with, as we have too here in Israel, is that of radical Islam. Of course, those of you who have been following my content, and I'm sure many of you have known this before you even arrived here at my channel, you are aware that Hamas, Hezbollah, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, they are all Iranian proxies. They are funded by the Islamic Republic, and they are radical Islamic terrorist organizations who are seeking the annihilation of Israel and the Jewish people. And they are funded, of course, by the same organization that is the government overseeing the Iranian people today. In fact, the Iranian people often refer to their government as the head of the octopus, and there are different proxy organizations, of which there are 12 in the Middle East. They refer to them as the tentacles. So, of course, the proxies are in Gaza and then in Syria, but also in Yemen and Iraq. And there are 12 who are acting on behalf of the Islamic Republic. So the Iranian people, they have been oppressed by this radical Islamic spirit for the last 45 years since the Islamic Republic came into power in 1979 when they overthrew the monarchy, which was actually allied with Israel at the time. If you go back to the book of Esther and look, we have this beautiful encouragement and admonishment from Mordecai to Esther where he says, "For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish." And I see the Iranian people as being in this very similar position as Esther, where they look around and they see that they're already perishing under the persecution of the Islamic Republic. So they can keep silent and continue to perish under the regime, or they can take a risk and do something illegal by showing support for Israel. They can risk further persecution, but in taking that risk, they might be helping to advance freedom and liberty and righteousness and truth and just morality in general. So they have risen up with courage in this hour to show very public and very vocal support for Israel in a way that we all need to be taking note, because as we know in Zechariah, at some point all nations will turn against Israel. Let's look at that verse real quick. Zechariah 12:2-3 says, "Behold, I am about to make Jerusalem a cup of staggering to the surrounding peoples. The siege of Jerusalem will also be against Judah. On that day, I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all the peoples. All who lift it will surely hurt themselves, and all the nations of the earth will gather against it." Now that is Zechariah 12:2-3. And we know that this is a prophecy for the end of the age because it says on that day. And in biblical Hebrew, that is Beyom Hahu. And when you see Beyom Hahu, on that day, then that is indication that the scripture in context is speaking of the end of the age. So we know that there will be a day when all the nations come against Israel. And what's significant about what's happening right now in Iran is that their nation is coming against Israel, and they will come against Israel even more so in the battle of Gog and Magog from Ezekiel 38. Iran is the Persian people mentioned in that passage. So we are moving in that direction, but what we see is even though their government has come against Israel, the Iranian people are standing strong with Israel. And that is a testimony for all of us, because there will be a day when your government, wherever you are in the world, will come against Israel according to the word of the Lord. So you have this picture of what it looks like to be willing to stand with Israel, even in the face of persecution, being arrested, and possibly being even lynched for that position. I also want to say that I see the same strength in the people of South Africa as the South African government is standing against Israel. Those of you from South Africa are proudly standing with Israel for God's glory. So I want to offer encouragement to you all in that as well, that you are that same testimony to the world of what this looks like, to be a light to Israel and to stand with Israel even as this prophecy unfolds. So what exactly does this look like for the Iranian people? Well, to begin with, if you checked on X, which is the platform formerly known as Twitter, I just want to start calling it the platform. You know how the artist formerly known as Prince, for a while, he was just called the artist? I think maybe we should just call that platform the platform. What do you think? It's a lot easier. I don't know. Anyway, on X, the Iranian people, and also Instagram, the Iranian people, the morning after that attack on April 14th, in which we had over 300 warheads launched towards Israel. Iran broke their own doctrine to launch from their own land rather than just using their proxies. And that next morning when we woke up, not only was it amazing to find out that the Lord had allowed for 99% of those warheads to be what I think was miraculously intercepted. We didn't experience a single fatality here in Israel. That's just our Iron Dome has a 90% success rate. So we had our Iron Dome, David's sling, and the Arrow missile defense systems at play, along with the Israeli Air Force, the U.S. Air Force, the British Royal Air Force, and I think France's Air Force as well, shooting down drones that were coming in from Iran. And we just had this miraculous protection from the Lord in that moment. And then we woke up the next day and saw just tremendous support online from the Iranian people. There was a hashtag that was trending. It's hashtag IraniansStandWithIsrael. And according to the social analytics site Talkwalker, there were over 60,000 posts that morning with that hashtag. Okay. Now, by comparison, there were just below 3,000 posts that said Iranians stand with Palestine. So the support showed for Israel that morning was just overwhelming from the Iranian people. And the data from Talkwalker showed that 41% of those posts came from Iranian expats from all over the world, people who have been seeking asylum or managed to leave sometime since the Islamic Republic has taken over. But an astounding 33% of those posts were actually from Iran, which is really amazing because that's where they face imprisonment and lynching and different consequences for actually demonstrating support for Israel online. It is literally illegal for them to show online support for Israel, and they were still doing that exact thing. There's one woman named Elica Le Bon who is Iranian British. Her parents managed to immigrate to England, and that is where she was born, and now she's residing in LA. She is an attorney and an activist, and she made a video that went viral just following that attack. And I think the position of the Iranian people as a whole could probably be best summed up by her words.
If you had listened to us for the past 2 years, much less the past 45 years, you'd know that Iranians don't want war with Israel. We want peace with Israel. Iranian people inside of Iran have come out and said this over and over and over again.
Iranians are not the Islamic Republic. We want peace with Israel. So that was her basic message to the world through her TikTok platform, was that she wanted the world to understand that the Iranian people are separate from the government and that they do not want this war with Israel. They want to have an extended peace with Israel. But what's even more amazing about the position of the Iranian people is that they aren't just showing solidarity with Israel, they were actually asking Israel to strike their nation. Not their people, of course, but military sites in their nation. This is completely different from the response that you get from the Palestinian people and even Palestinian Christians who all seek to come against Israel. And what makes them different is that unlike the Palestinians who have been basically brainwashed into believing that all of their problems started in 1948 with the formation of the State of Israel, the Iranian people solidly understand that not only their problems, but all of the dysfunction and all of the persecution, all of the lack of stability in the Middle East really does originate from the Islamic Republic. Now, their support for Israel has just recently, with that Iranian attack, gotten a lot of attention globally, but they have been standing firmly with Israel for a long time. They have expressed support for Israel since October 7th, but even before that, we have a long-term history of friendship with them that goes back even into ancient times. The very intertwined history that we have goes back as much as 2,700 years ago when King Cyrus helped to rebuild the temple here in Jerusalem. Let's look at what the Bible has to say about that. 2 Chronicles 36:22-23 says, "Now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled. The Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, so that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom, and also put it in writing. Thus says Cyrus, king of Persia, the Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has charged me to build him a house in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Whoever is among you of all his people, may the Lord his God be with him. Let him go up. So Cyrus fulfilled a prophecy in scripture that he was going to go help rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. Now Cyrus is mentioned over 30 times in the Bible, and one time the Lord even speaks to the fact that he is still in unbelief. He says, "For the sake of my servant Jacob and Israel my chosen, I call you by your name even though you do not know me." That's Isaiah 45:4. So even though Cyrus is in unbelief and he's not in a reconciled relationship with the Lord has called him by name and purposed him on the earth in that season to help rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. So he did that, but he didn't restore Israel to the Jewish people as like a political territory at that time. And of course, a few generations later, Esther was made queen of Persia when Persia was basically at its peak, and it encompassed about 44% of the world's population. If you want to know more about the history of Persia, check out my Purim series, because I did a real deep dive into the history and culture of the Persian people in order to put the story of Esther into greater context. So I will make sure to link that in an iCard somewhere up here in the corner. So that ancient biblical history between the Persian people and the Jewish people has continued on in a friendship even into modern times. The relationship really peaked in the 1960s. During that era, known as the Pahlavi dynasty, Iran was under the rule of the monarch Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi, who is commonly known as the Shah, which means king. The Shah sought to modernize Iran through a program in the 1960s known as the White Revolution. And of course, if you know Israel's history, Israel was also going through a lot of changes at that time, and in 1967 embarked on the Six-Day War, in which they fought 4 different enemies on all borders. The Shah took note of Israel's military excellency during that war and decided to form an allied relationship with the young nation. So the two nations formed both military and trade agreements, and in 1968, the Allies even embarked on a joint venture together, creating a crude oil pipeline that connected both Israel and Iran via the Red Sea to send oil from Iran up into Europe. But the relationships were very friendly on both a diplomatic and popular level. This wasn't all fun and games, though. The Pahlavi dynasty at the time was a monarchy, and it was rather autocratic. It was not a democracy, so they suppressed speech, and this angered a lot of the more observant and radical Muslims in the nation. This, of course, led to the Iranian Revolution and ushered in the era of ayatollahs and mullahs that we know Iran to be today, even earning the title as the greatest state sponsor of terrorism in the world. Since coming into power, they have sought to destroy both Israel and the United States of America, who they blame for bringing Western imperialism into the Middle East. And so, in a nutshell, this is where we get the death to Israel and death to America chants that are common among regime supporters. And I think this is important for you all to know, especially with the rise of the America First movement in the United States right now. You need to understand that the regime does not just hate Israel, it hates America too. The IDF is fighting a war and standing between not only Israelis and radical Islam, but Americans and radical Islam too. It is in your interest in this season to stand with Israel. The geopolitical tensions of the last 45 years have often overshadowed that long-running friendship between the Iranian and Israeli peoples. And even as believers, when we talk about passages such as Ezekiel 38, the War of Gog and Magog, and we see the role that Persia, Iran today, plays in that war, sometimes even we forget to recognize that the government is a different entity than the people, especially in the Middle East, where we don't have democracies and we don't have republics. The government is not always a direct representation of the will of the people. But even if we forget this, the Lord has certainly not forgotten the Persian or Iranian people. In fact, today, the Iranian church is considered to be the fastest growing church in the entire world. And that is in spite of Iran being 9th in the world for persecution of Christians, according to Open Doors Ministries. Many former Muslims have come to faith in Messiah Yeshua, Jesus, because of disillusionment with the violence that they see in radical Islam, paired with radical evangelism from the believers in the underground church, in spite of possibly being arrested for sharing the gospel message. But in Iran, it's not technically illegal to be a Christian. In fact, they have two different ancient Christian populations. They have Armenians and they have Assyrian Christians within Iran. The problem is that when Muslims convert to Christianity, they see that as undermining national security under the Islamic Republic. The morality police in Iran actively search for Bibles and other Christian material printed in their native language, Farsi, which is illegal. And they also look for women who are abstaining from wearing a hijab. And by some claims, the resilience of the Iranian Christians is part of what's leading to this revolution that's happening in Iran today. But if this is the case, it's less a matter of numbers and more a product of the power of prayer, because even though Iran has one of the fastest growing churches in the world, it still represents only a small percentage of the population of the Iranian people. It is really difficult to get accurate opinion polls and other data from within Iran because of the high level of censorship in the nation, but there is an organization called the Group for Analyzing and Measuring Attitudes in Iran, which goes by the acronym GAMIN, that has found creative and dynamic ways to work within the population to collect data to assess where the population is today. One study from GAMIN indicates that the Christian population amounts to only 1.5% of the overall population. Muslims are about 40% of the population, which is a dramatic decrease from the stated numbers from the government, which is 99.5%. And then the other percent would be a combination of atheists, agnostics, and Iran's ancient religion, Zoroastrianism. What else is interesting, though, about GAMIN is that they have data that shows us that what we're seeing online from the Iranian people isn't just an algorithm-induced echo chamber. It really, truly does reflect the will of the people. In a survey from 2022, it showed that 81% of 158,000 respondents were in favor of a democratic government in Iran. Only 15% supported the current regime. And then there was another 4% that were unsure. Among Iranians living abroad, 99% wanted to see a regime change. So support for Israel and a change in the regime are issues that go hand in hand in the Iranian population, and this spans a variety of demographics in the nation. Iranian journalist and activist Vahid Beheshti spoke to Caroline Glick about this. Let's see what he has to say.
To give the support to Iranian is not a favor to Iranian, is the combination, is a common war that we have. That's why I call it the holy war between good and evil, between light and darkness. On one side, Israel and the people of Iran and our allies, and on other side, this evil regime and the people who they want to support them. So you cannot sit on the fence anymore. You have to choose side.
This dissident movement is more than just online. The people have been protesting for a long time. In 2009, over 3 million people took to the streets to protest the election results that put one of Israel's greatest enemies, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, into power. The Green Movement, as it is known, came to a screeching halt when the Obama administration implemented the nuclear deal. Another movement took off in 2022 in response to the prison death of a woman named Mahsa Amini, who was arrested in Iran for failing to wear a hijab. This protest is known as the Woman Life Freedom Movement, and it is still ongoing 2 years later. Iranian dissidents even seem to have a leadership structure in place. Many of them are actually looking to the leadership of their exiled crown prince, Reza Pahlavi. Pahlavi hopes to see a regime change. He's very pro-democracy, and he would like to actually see Iran become one of the greatest democracies in the Middle East. And reforging the allied relationship with Israel is part of his vision. In fact, in April of 2022, he even embarked on an unofficial diplomatic and friendly visit to Israel to cast the vision for what an allied relationship could be in the future if they do see a regime change in Iran. I'm sorry, I'm getting a lot of red alerts on my phone right now, and you might be hearing the vibrations. Okay, let's see. Pahlavi supporters are known for attending pro-Israel demonstrations and flying their flag, the flag of the people, alongside the Israeli flag. And you can notice the difference between their flag and the flag of the Islamic Republic, because the flag of the people has an emblem of a lion and a sun, which differs from the Islamic expression of two swords. I'm not sure exactly what that is, but it differs from the flag of the Islamic Republic, even though it shares the same colors in the background. So that is how you can distinguish whether or not something is of the Iranian people or the Islamic regime. Even though there's been a long-standing relationship between Israel and the Iranian people, this didn't get much coverage until that April 14th attack from the Islamic Republic. And of course, this was the first time in history that the IRGC, the military wing of the Islamic Republic, has launched an attack from Israel from their soil. Prior to that, they've been doing all of their dirty work through their network of proxies, which has been a great relationship for all of them, because these 12 independent terrorist organizations get training, financial backing, military support from the Iranian regime, and at the same time, they're carrying out Iran's dirty work, whereas Iran can kind of stand in the background and just distance themselves from everything. They can claim denial of all the activity. And naturally, after the Iranian attack, Israel was going to launch a counterattack. And immediately, the media and government administrations, Piers, for example, the Biden administration in the UK, their Foreign Ministry Affairs Office, were already using the common statement that Israel should, quote unquote, show restraint. This is language that comes from the idea that Israel is militarily heavy-handed in the way that it has worked with the Palestinian population. What the world didn't expect, however, was for the Iranian people to not respond the same way as the Palestinian population. Rather than making claims that they were concerned about a disproportional use of force on their nation, or that it would cause a genocide of the Iranian people, targeting mostly women and babies. Rather than any of this, the Iranian people actually pleaded with Israel and America to support them in hitting military targets so that they could take over the regime. The attorney and activist that I mentioned earlier in this video, she was very quick to take on the comments section, which was actually calling the IRGC victims of an Israeli strike in Damascus. Let's see what she has to say here on this clip.
Elica, you are the only actual Iranian amongst us. You were born there. So what is your response to what you've heard so far?
Well, I'm really frustrated with the complete distortion of the narrative. Like you're talking about these strikes in Syria, first of all, not being on an Iranian embassy. So let's just get our facts straight. It was on a military base that was next to the embassy. Why is the military base there? Why is the Islamic Republic making Syria vulnerable to these attacks? You want to talk about bombs on Syria? Guess who's doing that? It's the Islamic Republic, by using other countries as as a base, so it makes Syrian people vulnerable to that. So let's not just act like there's strikes on there for no reason. Second of all, you talk about civilians, people were actually killed in that strike, which targeted senior IRGC leaders who were meeting with Hezbollah. Meeting with Hezbollah to do what exactly? Because let's just talk about what's been happening for the past 6 months, much less the past 4 decades, which is that we have seen October 7th, okay, which was an act of war. Let's be clear. Let's dispel this narrative that there's no evidence that the Islamic Republic supported that. It's been reported over and again. It was reported in the Wall Street Journal.
It was asserted in the Wall Street Journal.
Republic, no, let me finish. I'm not done. What do you think that the Islamic Republic is training, sponsoring, funding its proxies for? What do you think they are funding its proxies for in Israel, in Gaza, in Yemen, in Lebanon, and all of that to strike Israel on October 7th, every single day since October 7th, firing rockets into Israel. And then when there is a strike on IRGC leaders planning a meeting with Hezbollah to further attack Israel, you want to turn around and say, oh, people were killed.
Another popular Iranian-Canadian journalist and activist, Armin Navabi, he had this to say about the same situation.
A lot of people miss this, but after Israel attacked the so-called consulate of Iran, of this Islamic
Isn't that a consulate though? Some people are saying it is a consulate.
It's bullcrap, because there were 7 generals, military officials in that building, right? So what are they doing in a consulate? You do not get to have diplomatic immunity when you are having military operations or military planning in a building.
Sure.
You do not get to call that a consulate anymore, right?
Is that a violation of international law?
Israel strike on that building? No.
Yeah, but because they're saying that technically if it's a consulate, then it's a violation of international law. But as you made a good point, now an embassy or a consulate is for diplomatic purposes. It's not for planning
military attacks on Israel. Yes. They're basically losing the protection under international law for a building. You don't get to just call a building a consulate and just do whatever you want and just say, oh, you can't hit us because we just labeled this building a consulate. That's not how it works. This is what people don't understand with hospitals in Gaza as well. Like, as soon as you do military operations within a building, you lose your
hospital status or untouchable.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
These people are so well versed on international law, and they understand how the public is being manipulated into thinking that Israel is committing war crimes when it is in fact not. And they have come to our defense again and again and again. And in opposition to the growing isolationist positions of the America First movement, Beheshti, who we already spoke of, he told Carolyn Glick that 80 million Iranians are waiting for Israel and the United States to strike the regime. Let's see what he has to say here.
So there's a great role now for Israel to give the necessary support to Iranian people. It's not going to be a quick job. It's going to be a few months, maybe 8 months, 9 months job work. But give the necessary support to Iranian people. Then the Iranian people finish the job for Iran, Israel, and the whole world, and hit the head of octopus of terrorism inside of Iran. This is the only way to counter this existential threat, not just to Iran and Israel, to the whole world.
They're not asking America or Israel to fight a war for them, but they understand that the Iranian regime is the central location, the head of the octopus of terror. We say in a lot of times in evangelical Christianity, we say the head of the snake of terror in the Middle East. And what they're asking for is for America and Israel to get the ball rolling, to hit key military targets and let them do the rest. They're not asking Israel and America to fight a war for them. The limited strike from Israel following the April 14th attack might not have been what our Iranian neighbors were hoping for, but it certainly sent a strong message to both the Islamic Republic and the international community that Israel has what it takes to hit IRGC nuclear facilities without a single civilian fatality. Only time will tell whether or not we have another time of peace with our Iranian neighbors before the Gog and Magog war. Only the Lord knows this. But they have demonstrated such courage and strength as they have stood with Israel, and that is something that we can all learn from, and we should all stand with them in response. So thank you so much for being here with me today. Please make sure to share the article and share this video. Make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell, and I will see you all next video.